The easiest way to open up the Camera Raw plugin would be to obviously double-click on an image in Bridge that's a raw image. And let's do that. I'm going to double-click on this one right here. We are in the Raw plugin. Now we're at version 6.0. It's telling me the image was taken with a Nikon D2XS. So we're getting information already about the image. Let's do a spin around the interface here and check it out. For example, this button right here, when you select it, takes you into full screen, which I like. That makes it easier for you to see everything that's going on here. The buttons running across the top of the screen, some of them are familiar to you, I'm sure. You've got a zoom tool. We have a hand tool. This is for white balance. This is for color sampling. This is for hue saturation and adjustment, cropping tool, straightening tool. You have a healing brush tool, a red eye tool. I like this one. This is auto exposure, and we'll deal with all of these in a minute. This button right here, if you click it, actually if you click it, it will change things over here. That's called a graduated filter. So we can adjust the exposure, brightness, contrast, saturation, clarity, sharpness, and color of an image in RAW based on a gradient. This button takes us right back into preferences if you want to go there. And of course we can rotate left and right using these buttons. This is the one I usually click first. Way down here, click this button. This opens up what's called the workflow. We're working in an image that has a color space of RGB 1998, which is probably the most common. We do have others that we can work with. In most cases, I would use that one or the bottom one, the lowercase sRGB. We'll leave that alone at 1998. We're going to talk more about color later. The depth, I almost always go to 16-bit. Remember, this is a raw image. All those colors are waiting for you. Go 16-bit, you got trillions of colors. You've got a better image to work with. We'll bump it back to 8 in Photoshop when we get done adjusting it. We want more color. We're going to go 16-bit. Size can actually be determined here. You can go all the way up to a 25 megabyte image. That's 6144 by 4081 pixels. That's a lot. We'll leave it at 12 so we can work efficiently. Resolution, change it here. Pixels per inch or centimeter. Usually we measure pixels by the inch, so many per linear inch. I don't like sharpening here. I'll do that later. But you can sharpen arbitrarily for screen or paper, or in other words, additive or subtractive. A screen is an additive unit. Colors project out at you. Paper is subtractive. Things bounce off and come back to your eye. Typically, things on a screen look sharper than they do when you print them. In the case of sharpen, I'm going to adjust that myself, so I'm going to leave that at none. We can, when we're done, open this as a Smart Object in Photoshop. Smart Object gives us a whole lot more options in Photoshop on how we deal with an image, especially in being able to undo things. And we'll leave that alone for now. We're just going to click OK. The only thing I did was give it more stuff, 16 bits. And if you remember from lesson 1, we did talk about bit depth. Click OK. We're back into the image. So we looked really quickly at these buttons up here. You will notice that if I click on some of these buttons up here, you will get a slew of buttons over here. Let's look at these two buttons up here first, though. This is my histogram. Historical information on where the color information is in this particular photo. That's like a fingerprint of the image. If I click this button, notice those areas that turn blue. Those are blown out areas in the shadows. There's no detail there whatsoever. They're black. I don't think I've got any blown out highlights because this is a dark image, but if I did, you'd see those areas come up in red. So those are areas where you can see you have blowout if you need to. Down here, you've got some basics. We're in basic right now, which is this tab right here. White balance, temperature, tint, exposure, fill light, all kinds of things going on. The next button is for tone curving. We can go parametric, which is mean controlling it on the image, or we can go point for point right now and begin adjusting it. If you've ever worked with curves, this is where you are right now, curves. Next button over is for details like sharpening. This is where I like to control sharpening. And noise reduction. What's noise? Noise is the grain, in a sense, of the image. When you shoot with high resolution films, but you're shooting at high speeds, basically you're going to get more grain. And this can actually help you eliminate some of that grain. The next button over is for hue, saturation, and luminance. This is actually a really good one because you work directly on the image to control it. The next one over is called split toning for highlights and shadows. So in other words, we can control our highlights without changing our shadows or vice versa. Lens correction, you have chromatic aberrations, which are typically fringes on digital images that occur around edges, and they are in the red cyan to blue to yellow. We can fix them right here. Your FX is for a grain. You want to add a little bit of grain to the image, make it look older, and even do a vignette on it. Next one over is calibration. Now I'm using Adobe Standard for my profile, but if you recall, this is a D2XS image. So if I click here, I actually have some presets for the D2X. If I'm running my D3, I'd have presets out there for the D3. This actually helps the overall generic color scheme get you closer to what you need, and then you can make your own fine adjustments. Next one over is presets. What are presets? We'll make them, but presets are actually ways for you to adjust an image and then come back, click a button, and do the same thing to another image. That's a really powerful one. And the final one, which actually will do something here, it's called a snapshot. Snapshots are snapshots of what you did to this image. This is what I always like to do up front. I come down here and I click New, a new snapshot, and let's call it Basic. All right, I now have a basic snapshot. If we come back over here into, let's go over here, and the post-crop vignetting, what I'm going to do is create a vignette. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go back to snapshot, and I'm going to make one of that. You get it. Every time you do something major. So let's say you're doing several things and you go, oh man, I want to get back to the original image. This is an easy way to do it. You go back to basic and you're there. Or you might say, well, let's see what it looks like with the vignette, and you can go here. The cool thing about this is you can create these snapshots and then jump around in them, and even at any time you want to go back to the basic one. Let's say we like that. You've got two buttons down here. You've got Open, which will open us in Photoshop, and you have Done. If we select Done, the image is saved the way we remember it, but it's still there. This is non-destructive editing, and you'll see this icon appear right there. That means if I reopen it, it's going to take me back to the way I was, including things like my snapshots. It'll always be there. It's kind of like a perfect memory, if you will. Let's get back out of this again. In the previous segment, we looked at preferences, and we talked about that sidecar. In other words, this image is still the same. We're looking at it based on non-destructive editing. We can go back anytime we want to and change it. Let's say we do. Right-click your mouse on this and go down to Reveal in Finder. It's going to open it up in your Finder. There's the file. Here's the sidecar. Same name. If I come over to this and I want to move this image, I got to move them together. So if I want to give this to somebody and I want them to see the vignette, I got to give them both. But if for whatever reason, I just want to start all over again, right-click your mouse here and say Send to Trash. If we then come back here, as you can see, we're back to start. Remember one thing that's very important. The Camera Raw plugin is totally non-destructive. So no matter what you do to that image, you can always come back and change your mind.